So I have to say that I was super impressed with you this morning. I have invited many people to join me in the plunge, not in the plunge at the same time, but to join me doing a plunge. And people last maybe 30 seconds, if that, and they jump right out. So you're lasting 10 minutes today. Was super impressive.
I appreciate it. It felt good. Yeah. Well, second time. So it was, I had to get close to your 10 there. So yeah.
Nobody does that. That's so crazy.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you letting me join you this morning. So yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. It was good.
Yeah. Well, you were already pretty high in my estimation of like cool people, great people. But after seeing you go 10 minutes in the plunge.
That did it.
Oh, that was like, you went up 2 or 3
awesome. Sweet.
steps from there.
Yeah. No, that was good. Yeah. I definitely want to get more into that. I mean, it's just, you hear the health benefits. So
yeah,
it was cool.
Well, good for you, man.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us for another Sidewalk Conversations. I'm so grateful that you've decided to tune in. I have another really special guest today who actually flew in from Wisconsin to join us. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat with Tyler, who I'll introduce in a moment. But before I do, I just want to say a thank you to our sponsor today. So today's sponsor is the Van Ward Foundation. And basically there are a group of people who anonymously support the work that we do. And so every month they send a donation through Patreon that sponsors our foundation. And the foundation not only supports these interviews, but the work that I do with cancer patients, newsletters, and a variety of other projects. And so a big thank you to those who are part of that great group of people who support the work. So thank you. Now, let me introduce to you Tyler Hake. Thank you for joining us, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, we've been talking a lot about the goodness of Texas. You inspired to join us here, and
man, maybe every couple months, maybe. Yeah. The heat's a little much, but I'm getting used to it. Yeah.
Hey, we're only in March.
I know. Yeah, this isn't anything compared to what's coming. Yeah.
All right. Well, one of the things I like doing with these stories is I like to start like at the beginning, where people talk a little bit about some of the ways they were raised, some of the key influences in their life. And so let's start there with you. Where'd you grow up? Tell me a little bit about that, and like maybe some key experiences or influences in your life at that time.
For sure. Yeah. So Madison, Wisconsin, born and raised. 2 parents.
Go Badgers.
There. Go Badgers. Yep. Yeah. I have 3 younger brothers, I'm the oldest of 3, so 2 younger brothers.
Yeah.
So we all live close together still, which is great. We're about
cool.
10 minutes apart at most. Childhood growing up was awesome. Very, very close, tight-knit family. We did a lot of stuff together, a lot of trips, family dinners, things like that. Just grew up with a lot of love and care from parents. I mean, they were, my parents both owned their own businesses growing up, so they were kind of around for everything.
Wow, great.
Yeah, which was really, really great. And so that kind of allowed us to do things outside of maybe a normal schedule. Just kind of got a lot of experiences from a young age doing that, which we're very grateful for.
Now, just for those who may not know, I interviewed your mom a couple of weeks ago. And so that's how we got connected.
Yep.
I got to know you and your family through Susanna, who I met at Hope for Cancer in Mexico. And I really appreciated her, but then when I met the rest of the family, I'm like, this is like a golden family. This is a family that's got its shit together.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Seriously.
I appreciate it. We'll take it. Yeah.
Okay. So when you think about your life and some of the key influences for growing up, you graduate high school, spent some time in college, but then you took a little bit of a left turn, I guess you'd say. So tell me a little bit about that journey, that part of your story, kind of what prompted you to move in the direction that you ended up moving in.
Sure, yeah. So school growing up, I didn't quite enjoy high school, middle school, all the way through. It was always kind of like, why am I learning this stuff? Am I going to use this stuff?
Right.
Struggled a little bit here and there, but yeah. So as I said, my parents own their own businesses, so that was kind of always something in the back of my mind. I looked up to the freedom and flexibility that they were kind of able to have with those businesses.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of experience in entrepreneurship, a network marketing business at one point, and helped my dad with his business. So that was kind of through high school. But when it was time to graduate high school, my parents never pushed me to college, but it was just kind of the next step for me at that time. It was, just kind of, I didn't really have an ambition to go out and do anything that I was excited about or passionate about. And so college was just kind of it. I got accepted to a college and it was meant to be. So
there you go.
I don't know why I thought that, not liking high school was going to translate any differently to college. And my first year was great. It was kind of my first experience out of the home. I was about an hour away from home, which was just far enough, but I was still close. I went back, relatively often. And I kind of was able to spread my wings a little bit, made a lot of friends, got into kind of my first serious relationship in college. Just got to kind of feel like I was experiencing life a little bit more so.
Right.
That school part really did not pick up much. And I think,
nice way to say that.
Yeah, that is the nice way. And so I think very quickly through my freshman year, I kind of felt that same way of like, you have to take the general courses. There's a lot of things that I'm taking I feel like I'll never use. I was going for a general business degree, so kind of following in that business path. But I just, it was always kind of a struggle of taking courses, feeling like I wasn't getting things out of them. I didn't really feel like I learned well in a classroom setting. So it was a couple years of that on and off. After my freshman year, like I said, I was in my first serious relationship. That ended horribly. Went through a kind of a stage of depression, quite bad. And so I dropped out of college after my freshman year. And my sophomore year, my first semester, when I had decided to drop out, was kind of through my first semester. I joined a fraternity to make a couple new friends. And I was commuting for a little bit, kind of doing half classwork, half working at home, and got to a point where I'm like, I want to be back for my friends. And so decided to come back, and still the school piece was like, I was there for the wrong reasons, 100%. And so grades were horrible. I ended up getting kicked out. And I ended up coming back one more time for friends, and that was kind of like the last hurrah for me at that point.
Yeah.
And through this happening, I was still I was doing business workshops, and I was still kind of in this realm between my mom and dad of learning things like that, and being around people who own their own businesses, and just kind of seeing that world. And so I had an opportunity when I finally decided that I'm done with school. This is not something I should pursue anymore. This was after probably 2 years of actual school, probably 3 years since I had started.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity with a family friend who started a window cleaning business. And at that time I had dropped out, and I kind of had nothing going for me. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so this opportunity fell into my lap to work for the summer for this gentleman, Malcook's, Todd Malcook, you know him.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Todd started this company, and so I worked for him this summer, and it was really cool. I mean, fresh off the ground, got to be somewhat in the experience of like building up a business from the ground, sourcing clients, marketing, things like that, pricing. And I found that to be a cool experience to be a part of. I was there for the work more than anything. So I did all the jobs, I cleaned everything. And that got me a lot of like pride in my work. And just, I've always been something that was instilled early on with my parents, just work hard and, do a good job with things. And so I carried that into that.
Now, before you get too far into that, I do want to do applause because one of the things we were talking about before we went on the air was that, there seems to be this cultural pressure for people to go from high school to college, whether or not it's something that they should do. And we were talking in the car about, like, wouldn't it be cool if people were more free to choose other options? Because there are so many other ways to get a good education. It doesn't always have to be by going into debt for a formal education at XYZ University. There are other ways to learn. And it sounds like once you kind of sorted through the, hey, college is not for me, God opened some doors for this.
Definitely.
And that's kind of where you launched, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And certainly something maybe I wish happened sooner, but, kind of went through the whole experience there. But learning and it was a piece of that business that I learned after the fact of kind of doing things on my own was learning hands-on was my route to take. And so totally was not the college route for me. And it's something I've gotten passionate about and kind of talking with other people about is, you don't have to go to college, right? There's certain degrees, maybe if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a teacher, things that you may need. But learning in the world, getting hands-on experience with things, finding mentors, learning from people. There are so many other options than college. Yeah. So big thing there.
So let me talk about another experience you had. So there was in the middle, I think this was a part of your work, you were doing some work, and you had a very dramatic, almost near-death experience where like you weren't sure you were going to survive. Talk a little bit about that experience.
So fast forward a little bit after I worked with Todd with that business, I ended up buying the business. So I kind of ran it after the first year for a number of years. And so window cleaning was the business, a couple other services like that, but all basically warm weather services. And so we would shut down in the winter. And I was in the habit of, this was my second year when I owned the business, winter. And I would just take any jobs I could get in the winter, whatever came across. We had a family friend who reached out, and I think her mom had passed. She was selling their house and wanted the basement cleaned out. And so I was like, I got a pressure washer. I can come down and spray things out. She had a drain down there. And so, it should work out good. So I go over there, and nobody's living in the house. It's the middle of winter. The heat's off. The water's off. Well, the water was on partially, but, no, it's basically vacant. And so I'm down in the basement, I'm cleaning the floors, and I remember all of a sudden, I kind of started to just feel something, and all of a sudden my head's just pounding. And that was kind of the first, like, something's wrong.
Wow.
And I was probably about an hour into cleaning, give or take. And my mentality normally is push through it, like, it might suck for a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to get the job done. And so I'm pushing through it as best I can. And all of a sudden my stomach's hurting. I'm feeling a little lightheaded and something's just not right. And I don't really know what's happening at that point. But again, I'm in a basement, a concrete room. I'm running a machine and I'm like, maybe it's just too loud. And so I shut the machine off. I sit down on the stairs in this basement, unfinished basement. And I'm just really out of it. I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
And I remember standing up thinking I'll just walk it off maybe, and I go down on the ground. I pass out. And I all of a sudden I'm awake and I'm sitting on the stairs. I'm in a completely different position than when I remember going out. And I had missed a bunch of calls and texts from my family, and well, turns out it had been like 6 hours that I was out.
Wow.
So I'm on the ground. I don't know anything that happened in that time, but the only thing I know is that I moved from the ground to the stairs. And so, but it had been quite a long time. And I remember texting my brother. I was supposed to be at dinner with my family. Where are you? You're running late. Like, is everything okay? They had my location. They saw I was still at the job. And so I text back, I'm on my way home right now. I don't know what happened. Like, I'm just running late. And I'm so out of it, like I'm delirious basically. And I remember the only thing in my mind at that point was, I need to get out of this house. Like something's really wrong.
Yeah.
And so I leave all my equipment in the basement. I'm going up the stairs. I remember tripping a ton of times. I had gashes all over my legs and my knees. And I make it outside. I make it to the truck. And basically what had happened was I was running a machine in an enclosed space. There were windows for ventilation, but ventilation was not what I was thinking of at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so carbon monoxide poisoning was what had happened. And so really scary situation. And I eventually get out to my truck, and I remember getting on the phone, I think with my brother, and he's like, dude, you sound drunk. Like, what's up? Something's wrong. And we ended up, I don't really remember the conversation, but basically we got to the point of like, do you think you've got carbon monoxide maybe? Because you were running a machine and, connecting dots here. And so they call the ambulance. They ended up coming, picking me up. And I almost had hypothermia because I had passed out on this wet basement floor, middle of winter, the heat's off in this house. And which is just a whole other crazy piece of that story. So they get me in the ambulance. They couldn't get my pulse. They couldn't get like my heart rate. I mean, I was in a bad spot.
Wow.
And I eventually had to get med flighted to a different hospital. I kind of at that point, I remember in my own head thinking, I'm in the hospital, like I must be okay. Doctors are gonna have me. And my parents behind the scene are literally thinking I'm gonna die. My heart rate was shooting up and down like crazy vital signs, and the doctors were not thinking very positively on the whole outcome of it.
Wow.
So yeah, it was definitely a scary situation. And when I get to the hospital, and it was about a 30-minute med flight, about an hour and a half away where we went to a different hospital. And I remember doctors like, this doesn't happen. You don't go to sleep from carbon monoxide and wake up. It just doesn't happen. The word miracle got thrown around a couple times, and so it was a really, really crazy couple days, and just, very, interesting thing to look back on and kind of where I'm at now. Yeah.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked yet about your faith journey,
Mm-hmm.
but I would guess after an experience like that, something got your attention.
Yeah.
Is that part of how you interpret it?
Totally. Yeah. I remember at that point in my life, I wouldn't have considered myself a Christian, but I remember thinking like God's got a plan for me. I wasn't meant to go. Was kind of the words that I would say out loud. And specifically, when people are throwing around the word miracle at me, I'm like, something happened, right?
Yeah.
So
did you grow up around faith, or was this something that happened later for you? How did that journey start?
So, no, we didn't really grow up in faith. My parents, for different reasons, both grew up in the faith, but for different reasons kind of went away from it as they got older. And so it never wanted to be something that they forced on us growing up, which really turned into us not doing it at
anything.
all. Yeah. And so we would go to church on Christmas. Every Christmas, every once in a while, maybe Easter or something.
Yeah.
That was kind of my experience. And my memories are really, we dressed up nice. We went as a family. I heard a bunch of stuff I didn't understand. That was kind of it. That was my church experience.
Okay.
And we would do that on Christmas kind of up until maybe high school or so, kind of teetered off. And then during college, I didn't do anything. Really nothing up until I was probably, really within the last 2 years is when I truly became a Christian.
Wow.
There were some seeds that were planted along the way. The accident was one of them, 100%. Some associations I had with some business groups I was in, there were some very strong Christians. And again, just kind of some seeds planted for me at that time.
So what turned the corner for you? What was it that finally said, okay, I need to explore this further?
Yeah, so there was some stuff going on with my parents, health things that we can maybe get into more, but they, through that, kind of reinvigorated their faith a little bit. And honestly, my accident, I will say, if I had to guess, that was probably the first time in years that my parents had prayed. It was a very just traumatic, like turn to God experience for them.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of was like I said, reinvigorated them a little bit, and then turned to, 4 years later, they're both dealing with, some of their individual health struggles. My dad's was really bad. And basically, long story short, went through all the medical things he could think of, didn't have any answers until he turned to God. And that was kind of his healing journey.
Wow.
And so through that experience with him, the church that we go to now, I got introduced to the pastor there. And his testimony, I didn't get into this a lot, but I had a really, really interesting experience in college that was just kind of living life, partying, doing drugs and alcohol, and a lot of problems that I now look back on as just, things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. And so his testimony, when our pastor Rob shared his testimony, it really resonated with me of a really negative past, a history, and kind of how he came out of that, and it was all through Jesus.
Yeah.
And so hearing that, I was like, man, this guy I resonate with. I want to talk to more. we had him over for dinner one night, I think, and I kind of just asked him, I'm like, I've always sought out coaches and mentors in my life for business, for health, for personal stuff.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, hey, I'm looking for something more. Could you be kind of a spiritual mentor to me? And he said, yeah, for sure. And, so we started doing lunches together where I would just kind of ask questions. And it's funny enough, the first time we got together, I'd been to church a couple times and so heard some of the messages, but he shared the gospel with me the first time that we had lunch together. And I was at this point in life where I was just I was really low. I'd gone through all this stuff in college. It kind of carried into now my professional adult life, and I was just struggling with things. It was affecting my relationship with my now fiance, personal relationships, my health, all this different stuff. And I was just ready for something more that wasn't me. I was kind of in this vulnerable, humble place of just like, I need something else.
Yeah.
And he shared the gospel with me. And I remember saying like, man, if I believe this, like, what do I need to do? Like, how do I get this peace that you have if I truly believe these things? And so he goes, well, why don't we just go in the parking lot after this and I'll pray for you. And, basically there's just a couple things, do you believe that Jesus is God? Do you believe he died for your sins, that he can give you his righteousness, and, that you'll commit to follow him for your life? And so he prayed for me. I kind of said those things out loud, and that was kind of my moment of like accepting and following Christ. And so it was weird to have that happen that day. It felt so quick. And so easy, I guess you could say, but it really was. I was just at a place where I knew I needed something, and the Lord really met me in that moment through Rob.
So before then, like, you have this amazing like miracle story, but it's not enough to kind of turn you completely at that time. It probably got your attention a little bit, but
sure.
So as you look at the time between that experience and your conversation with your pastor, were there some specific roadblocks for you, either emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, that kind of kept you from turning to God more completely before that moment?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was probably just having so much faith in myself, but really it's pride in myself of just, I can do whatever I need to do to get through this, to be successful, to make money, to make my life as good as I want it to be.
Yeah.
And it's no fault to my parents at all, but that's just kind of how they raised us. They're entrepreneurs. It's like, you can do anything you set your mind to. And so I didn't really have specific like roadblocks to God or to Christianity, but it was just, I was so involved in myself of what I could do for me that it was hard to think I needed anything else. And again, it was just, I just had to get to this point of like, I was broken and I really needed something more than myself. And I was just ready to put my faith into something.
Appreciate your honesty with all that. So once you made that commitment, was it like a dramatic thing that you felt, or was it more like, okay, got that piece settled and now things are beginning to work themselves out? How did things change for you once you made that like declaration?
Yeah. I think the first thing that really hit me was I started to get around a lot of good, godly Christian people. And so my association started to change quite a bit. And, just getting like fellowship with men around me who had previous experiences in their past, who were open and vulnerable, could talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
That really sparked me to like look at the things that I needed to change in my life, how I could best follow Christ, kind of leading by example for me.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that maybe changed for me inwardly was my thoughts about other people. And not that I've ever been super negative or mean or anything like that, but just a general sense of thinking about how I talk about people, kind of in a gossipy way.
Yeah.
But just that really came like in the forefront of my mind of I can be better. I can talk about people better. I don't need to say certain things. And it was most of the time, it was just kind of, it's what we did in our friend group. It's kind of how I grew up in college. It's like, you're just making jokes. And so, that was a huge initial change of just the way I thought about other people.
Wow. Love it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned briefly that your parents went through a very difficult season, and that's part of how I met Susanna. And then when we were talking at Hope for Cancer, I heard about what was going on with your dad and how debilitating that was for him. So when you're watching this as the oldest son, probably feeling some like, I gotta help, I gotta be here.
Yeah.
How did you work through some of what they were dealing with as their son watching it all?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This was part of my like low point, and I think really some of it stemmed from the issues. The struggles my dad was having, we don't fully know. It was partially hyperacusis, which is really heightened sound, inner ear stuff. But he couldn't leave the house. I mean, dogs barking 4 houses down would trigger him through the bedroom, like crazy stuff. And so he couldn't do a lot, and it kind of dismantled our family. We've always just done a lot together, and we just couldn't do the same things. And so I was already at a point where I was struggling with my own things. And now on top of this, it's like our relationships were, the family relationship dynamic was suffering, and partially because of my own things, but now especially because of my dad, and my mom was dealing with some skin cancer stuff. And so just all this happening at the same time was really challenging. That was definitely difficult, but again, they turned to faith, and that was just a beautiful moment to kind of see how that transformed their perspective on life and dealing with issues like that. And so me seeing that really prompted me, and again, that was kind of leading up to this,
one of those seeds that were planted, right?
100%. Yep. So yeah, it was a very trying time for the family. Really changed, I think, especially now how we operate, just because it was 2 years of this. This wasn't just like 2 months. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And so we all had to learn how to adapt. And I wasn't doing the best job. I wasn't doing a good job. These are one of the things that kind of were coming to mind as I'm struggling, as I was always the oldest. Like, my brothers look up to me, and I wanted to provide for my family in a sense, just kind of hold people together and be a good role model. And I could feel myself slipping from the family in this season that we had. And so those were one of the things and my mom had a conversation with me at one point about kind of needing to step up, and she talked about that in her podcast a little bit. And that was kind of one of those things that was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm struggling with my own stuff, but it's affecting the family, and it's kind of, causing all these other problems. So yeah, it was a good learning experience on how to deal with things like that, and just, the lens that we look at life through in situations like that.
I find myself saying often, and from how you're talking about, I would guess you'd say the same, but sometimes the hardest seasons of our life end up being the most significant seasons, because there are things that happen, both in terms of, like what you said, realizations about maybe some of your own shortcomings that you need to address. That's probably contributed to the challenge that you're in. But also the responsibility that you have to others around you. Like, there's a time to say, hey, I need to focus on my own things, and I need to kind of get my stuff figured out. But on the other hand, there's like, okay, I can't wallow in this. I got some responsibilities that people need me.
100%. Yeah.
And so it's the combination of those things, which you hate going through at the time, but then you look back in retrospect and say, man, God sure used that for good in my life. What the enemy meant for evil, he meant for good.
100%. Yeah, one of the things, I learned early on from my parents, just with their mindset, and was, failing is an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And I think especially with some of the larger ones in life, it doesn't make it easy in the moment at all. But I think I feel like I've always had that perspective on things as I'm going through them. Like, things will get better, and I'll learn from this. And it's a simple concept, doesn't mean it's easy, but it's definitely served me in life to kind of look at things that way. But certainly through things like that, when it's more than just me, involved.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. So you're getting ready to get married.
Yep.
Just around the corner.
It's coming up soon, yeah.
That's part of why I'm so grateful that you're willing to come in the midst of all this planning. So I have a son that's getting married as well, and so I know how busy you guys are. But you're in this prep process. What are some of the things that you're learning in this season of getting ready for marriage that you think might be worth sharing about?
Yeah, communication was something we struggled with in the beginning. I think we can both admit that, and in different ways. But that was something that we had to work through. And A lot of it was unmanaged expectations, and those were two things that we didn't think about.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we had people around us who we could talk to these things about. We did a little bit of some premarital counseling and stuff like that, and so these were topics that came up. And but thinking about those things in the sense of it's not just me anymore; it's two people, and I have to really cater to the things I know and the things I think, and the same for her. And so that was a really transformative.
So how did that communication challenge play out for you guys?
Yeah, a lot. Well, again, so the unmanaged expectations was a big one for us, and it was not communicating how we wanted to, how certain things we wanted to, be done, or how we wanted to react to things, or stuff within the house, or things within the relationship, or how we were loving each other, or things like that. And it was just a lot of it was just we both shut down in certain ways. Things get overwhelming, and I just don't want to bring it up because I don't want to fight, or something like that. And so we would go months of not talking about things, and it caused us problems, as you might imagine. So
Really?
Surprise. So a lot of stuff like that. It was just learning to talk about the hard stuff, and to be open and vulnerable. I mean, we should be more vulnerable with our partners than we are with other people. And that was just, I think, a struggle with us. And so it was just kind of learning to overcome some of the fears, and some of them were passed on maybe from past relationships that we had, or from the way that our parents raised us. And that was a big one with managed expectations. I remember going through is like, what are the things your dad did for you when you were growing up that you'd expect me to do as your husband? That he did for your mom. And so that was a mind-blowing conversation to have. And so a lot of stuff like that.
No, one of the things that we talked to our kids about this a lot, and even though we know it as not only the principle but as practice, that having the hard conversations, though there's everything inside us wants to avoid that conversation, when we have it, it's so good on the other side, especially if you do it well. Now, sometimes you have to apologize for the conversation for the way you handled it. But even that's a good conversation, because you learn about, like, how do we have this kind of conversation? 100%. What would be good? Like, if you want me to bring something up, how should I bring it up? Well, it would help if you qualified it a little bit and said, I love you mostly all the time. And it's just this little thing. And this thing does not mean that I hate you.
Yes.
So all of that. But those hard conversations, we don't want to have them, but they can be so helpful.
100%. Yeah. And that's a lot of where the issues come from. That it's like the 90-10 rule, that 10% of stuff is going to come back and bite you later.
Yeah.
And so you better deal with them.
Yes. That 10% all of a sudden becomes the 90%.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
That's all you see. All right. So wrapping up, is there anything that you want to talk about further? One of the questions I often like asking is, if you had to come up with a life message or like a principle that serves as all the other, the umbrella for all the other principles, is there something like that you have in your life, or something else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. Answer would have been very different 10 years ago, and it would have been very different 5 years ago. But, since I've come to relation with Christ, I mean, the foundation of my whole life now is that, that relationship and living in that. And there's a lot to understand still and a lot to work through, but, that's changed. A lot of the stuff we've talked about, issues, whether that be relational or business or whatever. I mean, turning to Him now is it's not always my first option, but it's what I try to be my first option. And that's helped me through a lot of things. And, I think in today's day and age, that can be a polarizing topic.
You say, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And, so, there's a lot of research I'm trying to do to understand things, and, so I can better talk about that with people and, kind of build my own foundation on that. But, I would say, I guess, for other people, if you don't have Jesus in your life, that's something to explore 100%.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to the relational stuff, the Holy Spirit has changed me in a lot of ways in how I deal with arguments, and, my temper used to be a problem. And so I find myself having a quicker reset when I get upset. I find myself, reacting to things a lot differently, loving my fiance differently. And so it's things like that are I'd love to say those are from me, but I don't think that they are. And so that relationship, is just so key in everything I'm trying to do now. And I think, we're all looking for something we all have a hole in us if we don't have the Lord. And I think we're all looking to fill that with something. Yeah. And in college, it was drugs and alcohol and girls and all the fun stuff I did. And it turned into my business, that filling my hole, that being my whole identity. And those things all fail at some point. Yeah. And so, just shifting that focus and perspective has been huge for me.
Well, I so appreciate your candor and your willingness to be vulnerable with me today and with our audience. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and appreciate your involvement with Sidewalk Conversations, and join us again next week with our next guest.